Once you leave the garden, so to speak, and you start to produce at commercial scale to sell to other individuals or clinicians or companies to make products, then a number of new critical control points come into play, because an herb may change hands many times before it reaches the final person who will use it.
Every stage of the supply chain there is opportunity for maintaining the highest feasible quality of the herb, and there's also every stage there's an opportunity for deterioration.
We don't spot buy and go out on the market and find the cheapest thing that's out there. Instead, we spend a lot of time making sure that we buy only from qualified vendors and that we buy by contract.
The first thing is just to get it on paper. What's your processing flow look like? And then going there, verifying that that's actually what's happening and verifying where the potential problems are.
We require, as part of the contract, that they test the material themselves and send us a sample with a written certificate of analysis.
We have cases where something coming from India that's cultivated on a farm has been tested at least 5 times and sometimes up to 8 times before it gets into the finished dosage form product. And that isn't because of lack of trust, that's because there's a chance at every place it goes, at every stop along the way, that something could happen and you really need to check again.
We just got in our annual harvest of ashwagandha here. All of the product that will come into this yellow box area, get this quarantine sticker put on it, and the quarantine doesn't mean anything's wrong with it, it just means it's in the inspection process for us to go through our steps. It could take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks for it to go through that process. But regardless of anything that comes in, we use a formula that's the square root of the number of containers plus 1. So if there's 100 containers here, they're going to take the square root, so 10 plus 1. They'll sample 11 containers and put together a representative sample that we then send off to the lab. If we have a good history with the vendor and with the product itself of having no contamination, they might inspect the entire bag but take from the top. That's the minimum. In that case, if there's a history that may be a little more troubled, we'll increase that. So they may inspect every bag, they may pull it out, we have a sifter, they may even run it through our own sifter to verify there isn't any unwanted material in the product.
We assign risk factors to products based upon supplier history, especially country of origin, and just the nature of the product. There's certain products that are just have a whole lot more risk of pesticide contamination.
Once the sample arrives here, first we start with the pre-ship sample. We'll repeat the testing. A certificate of analysis from a qualified vendor is a great document, but it's also important to satisfy yourself that the things that are in that document are true. And so we'll repeat, depending on our relationship with the vendor, some of the tests here. We certainly will do at least an identity test here. You want to make sure that what you're buying is the article that both you and the vendor thinks it is. It sounds sort of simple, but that's actually a place where people have made a lot of mistakes in the past.
And we never just assume that, oh, I know this is echinacea, or oh, I know this is lemon balm. Our job is to properly identify the plant material to make sure beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's 100% true to genus and species. Even if it comes from the same field, we'll do it again.
In addition to the organoleptic assessment, we'll do a foreign matter test. You look at the herb underneath a stereo microscope. That's at maybe a 6-power magnification, and you're looking for things that aren't supposed to be there primarily. When you buy an herb, we specify the plant part. It's important that you get the correct part because the official material is a particular thing. So for example, when we buy Echinacea purpurea herb or tops, we want it harvested in flower, which means that when you look at it under the stereo microscope, you should see little pieces of flower petal. If you don't see those purple pieces of flower petal, it wasn't harvested at the right time. It's not actually the official material, and we should get another sample. Foreign matter testing also picks up things like rocks or sand or parts of other plants as well as other plant parts. Those are all things, there's standards for them. A certain amount of it is unavoidable because you have an agricultural product. That's the kind of thing that does happen. But if you exceed the level, say typically it's going to be about 1 or 2%, then you have a material that either needs to be reconditioned by the vendor or that you don't want to use in a herbal product.
The second will be some form of more scientific identity testing. We use infrared light and a machine that measures the sort of fingerprint of the material received against reference materials.
Then anytime we receive ginger, it's going to be compared against that fingerprint to verify that the powder that is actually being presented is ginger.
We look at the graphs as a representational vision, but then the software itself can actually tell us that correlation that our eye can't tell. And as long as they're within a certain percentage, each herb has their own, but basically 95% or higher of a match, then that sort of is a second step of verifying that this ashwagandha is what we expected to get.
Thin layer chromatography is one of the most important identity tests that we do. It's a chemical identity test. If you're looking at Angelica, you'll see really striking light blue bands about 2/3 of the way up the plate. If you look at Angelica sinensis, which is Dong Quai as opposed to European Angelica, you'll see light green bands and in a different place. So you get a very striking visual reference that tells you that you have something different. It's also important to test in some cases for composition and strength. Those are also part of the pharmacopeal requirements. And so, for example, we'll test for essential oil in a wide variety of herbs. Quantity of essential oil, which you obtain by distillation, you put a sample in a flask and you boil it basically, and let the sample, as it goes up through the condenser, it condenses and separates into the water and the essential oil. And the measure of the oil is a measure of strength in some ways, and also in some cases of freshness. If you think about it, the longer an herb's cut and dried, the less volatile oil it will contain. Chamomile is a good example of that. Chamomile should contain a blue-colored essential oil. The quantity of that oil is what distinguishes medicinal grade or pharmacopeal grade chamomile from a beverage grade.
The third and fourth steps that we do are more around safety of the product. So we send samples out to third-party labs to check for microbial load as well as heavy metals load, knowing that there could be contaminants from the environment, from the packaging process, the shipping process, from the time it leaves the farm, is processed and gets to our doorstep, which could be sometimes 2 to 3 months.
Another important part of purity testing is to test for what some people call toxic elements, pesticide residues, heavy metals, and also maybe mycotoxins, aflatoxin and ochratoxin. All of those things are tested for in different ways. They're not things that we test for here in this laboratory. We send them to qualified third-party laboratories. Pesticides are typically done by gas chromatography, and the preparation is detailed. It really requires using a laboratory that knows exactly what they're doing and are familiar with the kinds of samples that we work with, which are botanical samples.
You also have to test for purity. And purity, it can be defined individually by each company. At a minimum, we define that as being with the microbiological levels of the raw material. So we'll test for total plate, yeast, mold, staph, salmonella, E. coli, coliform bacteria, Enterobacteriaceae, to see what can you not see with the naked eye in terms of how clean is this dried agricultural good.
It's really important because some products are just going to have microbes no matter what, and we don't claim sterile product, but we want to make sure there's no bad ones in there because, we don't live in a sterile world. We actually test several stages of everything. If we handle it at all, any processing, it gets tested again, which is actually beyond requirement of the FDA. So we just want to make sure that everything is just super safe.
Then we'll do a full heavy metal profile and find out what was in the soil that was pulled up that you can't see. For your purity levels to make sure it's safe for human consumption, as maybe the U.S. government defines it, and then more strictly as we define it, and create limits about what could or should be in there. Turmeric that we had, and we tested it, and the microbes were a little by 700,000 colony-forming units per gram, a little bit on coliform, it still would have been okay. And then we did a HBTLC, thin layer chromatography test, and it passed in its chemical profile. So it's the right genus and species, the Kumalanga. Then the heavy metal content was too high for our use. And we were about to bring in about 6,000 pounds of it. So the metals are just too high. You have to put a Prop 65 warning in it for California. So we're back to the drawing board there.
Certain types of microbial load can be safely treated with heat, steam, sterilization, but we also determine what's the load and can that be done without affecting the quality of the herb. If it can't be treated in the case of metals, there's nothing you can do to okay, I'm going to remove the lead or the arsenic from this, then that would go to a dispose pile. It will go over here into the sort of red rejected area, and then we'll ask the vendor what they would like us to do. Do they want it returned to them? Do they want it disposed of? Those are really the two options that we have.
If you're working directly with the source, you can work with the farmers to identify, like, wow, where in the process is this contamination happening? And you can work to mitigate that happening in the future.
Remediation is like the last thing we want to do. We do our job up front and we educate our vendors on how to process material properly, good handling and agricultural practices, good cultivation practices up front. Then we're really going to minimize how many times that's an issue in the back end.
What we try to do is actually avoid rejecting material by having really good quality assurance before the material gets here. That's why we have contracts, that's why we have specifications, that's why we do quite a bit of testing up front before the material even hits our dock. Nevertheless, sometimes rejections happen. It would be less than 1% of what comes in here.